Hi, I'm Lachie. You can spell my name with emoji if you like. And I've given this talk before, so if you have deja vu, I'm sorry. And I had my kids here, so I'll try not to swear with like saying monkey patch and that kind of thing. I work for Flood, and we do load testing. I just want to give my congratulations. He's going to be making pancakes again. So tonight I just want to tell you about how to get to know your app. Because we're all full stack engineers now. We need to know how all this stuff works. But we want to do it, you know, not like Elon Musk says, 40-hour weeks, that'll do. And before you have 20 years experience, that'll do too. So I guess I would ask you, do you have an idea of, or a sense of the impact that changing code has on the app or the users or your team or your business? I think it's a pretty common feeling to be, you know, like a junior, dropped in to your team, fresh out of GA maybe, and you feel pretty lost and powerless. You dive into your problem, and you work as hard as you can on it, but do you know if you're really going in the right direction, or like if every decision you make is sort of pulling in the right direction? I think of this as being stuck in a fog of war. So if you don't know, the fog of war was a term before we had Google Maps. It was where like a soldier only knew what they could see, or, you know, on a battlefield, you only know what you can see. And what we need to strive for is eagle mode, where you can actually sort of get a global view and see everything on the map. And eagle mode to me is about developing intuition. And I think of that as a global perspective on things, like getting a feel for it or internalizing your app. But you always need to get your intuition by using evidence, because intuition without evidence is just superstition. And while eagle mode is an important thing to put into your sort of arsenal, you don't need to be in it all the time. You can still, you know, focus and go back into the fog of war. Okay. I remember, you know, this is the slide that the presenter has that they can't remember what the slide's about. I just thought it was better to put one in, you know, get it out of the way. So what's a strategy for developing intuition? I think it's all about getting experience, so just doing stuff, and by gathering evidence. So, you know, you get experience just by doing it, and that also implies that you can get experience faster by just doing more stuff. And I think there's no general sort of rule for how to gather evidence. Like, that's down to your team and your app and all that kind of stuff. I kind of think of gathering evidence like a good way is just to be rigorous about it, and sort of a rigorous way is the scientific method, where you form a hypothesis and you adjust variables, you perform the experiment, and then you observe the outcome, and then you keep going around. And in an app kind of context, changing code is our way to change variables. Observing impact, I guess performing experiment is maybe running tests, and then you observe the impact of the tests, and then you adjust your hypothesis and you go around. That's the cycle we all know pretty well. It's just maybe Never heard of it in this way before? So what's the hypothesis of your app? And I really just mean that to be, what's the goal of your app? Have you actually thought about that? Maybe it's to, make more revenue, or to make your money last, or making your resort, like your site, and a leader in a niche, for example. And then you have a bunch of tech goals. So maybe it's a certain amount of 5 nines uptime, or maybe it's more abstract, like we want to just be the best dev team in the town, like Flood is. The important thing to realize is that tech goals aren't business goals, but they're all linked together. So, and usually the tech goals are in service of business goals. So you might think of your tech goals as a proxy for a business goal. Capacity. Do you have enough servers to serve a certain number of customers? But in reality, that might be a business goal of, can we support the customers who've already paid for a service, that kind of thing. Or, I don't know if you've heard this quote from, 100 milliseconds of extra latency costs Amazon 1% of its sales. It's actually like a very thin quote. There's not much to it if you look into it. But I guess intuitively it makes sense, the less of a hassle your site is, the more customers might spend. And then, the more fluffy seeming things do have a technical impact, like choosing Ruby on Rails. We know it's not the fastest thing out there. If you're writing in C, it'd be faster, but you wouldn't get the same sort or, quality of devs, or have that quality of dev shop. So that's our hypothesis. And then I think this is like the first step. You can see how changing code can affect tech goals and thus affect business goals. So the next step is to create some controlled conditions. And that's really to have repeatability and the variables that we talked about in a repeatable situation. And I think that that's just tooling. And for us, the kind of incumbent tools are so common that we all just use the defaults a lot of the time. RSpec for unit tests. Actually, I'll admit I haven't done Ruby for quite a while, so I'm not sure what the state of the art is. But I think people still use RSpec. Yeah. And everyone uses BuildKite. Yeah. Anyone who doesn't? Yeah. But there's one kind of tool, there's one kind of tool that's not quite as sort of ingrained in our tribe, and that's load testing. And essentially, load testing is a functional test, so something like Capybara or an integration test, I guess, at overscale. So if unit tests are in the fog of war and functional tests are eagle mode, load tests are the ultimate eagle mode, meta eagle mode. I don't know. Because I guess the hard truth is that the thing that you work on your laptop isn't your app. You have a really nice, smooth development experience, but it's not actually anything like your app when it runs in production. Especially the thing that your user sees, most users have no idea of all the layers underneath. And there's the Ruby version, the Rails version, rather. But I guess, it's also hard to grasp, I guess, when you come in that a Rails app is like a complex distributed system. It's set up in a particular static way, right? But the more you know about this, the better you can, like the more intuition you have about all the different parts, the more effective you'll be as a developer. Because the biggest lever we have is changing code. I think this is out of order, this bit, but yeah. But traditional load testing tools are, I don't know if you've heard of AB or Siege or JMeter, but they're like protocol level, and they basically try and simulate users by doing network requests. And to me, that's a bit like, trying to look at evidence, secondary evidence of a user, maybe like trying to work out what sandwich they ate by examining their footprints. So it's kind of like the protocol level things are in a fog of war. It's just a little bit broader than and yeah, it kind of only tests below a certain point. So we've got sort of a new tool that does load tests using browsers. And it's so, this is like a realistic thing. Lots of people using web browsers and hitting your app. We call it flat element. And when I made this talk, we didn't have a logo, but now we do. Yay. It uses Puppeteer and Headless Chrome. And it essentially takes the top portion of that, the iceberg, and it's running those distributed across a lot of browsers, which implies that the back end is the same, I guess. So yeah, that's just an example little thing. And these graphs sort of look a bit like how they look on Flood, but I guess what I'm saying is have a look at what your user performance profile is, change a small piece of code, run a load test again, and then examine it afterwards and see what's changed. You can change more stuff, but the more variables you tweak, the less sort of useful, the less utility it has for learning about your app intuitively, like gaining an intuition for your app. It's still really useful. And like the protocol level stuff, obviously I'm talking about browser level things here, but the protocol level stuff is still very useful. But yeah, I want to say this this is a really good way of getting an intuition for how your app holds together, hangs together. So I'm going to just do a live demo now. Oh no! Oh. So this is the part of the talk where someone switches away from their presentation and has something really embarrassing on the screen. I'm not going to do a live demo this time. I just wanted to do that joke. So in conclusion, Eagle mode. Strive for Eagle mode. Strive to get a global view of your application. And after I did the talk in Sydney, I realised that's not how you spell majestic. But ask questions. Ask the right questions. Learn to ask the right questions in your business outside your dev team, and try and see how everything fits together in your app. Do more to get more experience, and use a rigorous way to gather evidence. Maybe like the scientific method. Self-explanatory. Because using Ruby is a conscious decision. I think everyone has a sense of the trade-offs, but you're going to hit a point. If your app is successful, you're going to hit an inflection point, and you're going to hit that no matter what tech you use, and you're going to use it. You're going to find it with Ruby, especially, and you need to know what to do when you hit that point, because that's when your business is cheering, and then you might be spending long hours. So thank you. Any questions?
Wait. Sorry.
Wow.
Global variables.
What technology do you use to create your slides, and where do you get your assets from?
Well, I did it on an iPad, actually, iPad Pro on paper. And what was the other part of the question?
Where do you get your assets from?
Oh, I drew everything. So, yeah.
Anyone else?
Anyone else?
Cool. Thank you, Lachie.
Thank you.